The ballroom fell silent. 1,000 of Manhattan's elite turned toward the stage where Harrison Blackwell stood behind a crystal podium, the Blackwell Foundation's Lifetime Achievement Award gleaming beside him. The chandeliers cast fractured light across his silver hair, and for a moment the only sound was the soft clink of champagne flutes being set down on linen-covered tables. "Everything I have," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "exists because of one woman." In the third row, Cordelia Blackwell smoothed the skirt of her ivory Valentino gown. 23 years of marriage had taught her exactly when to perform. She lifted her chin, arranged her features into an expression of gracious humility, and prepared to accept the recognition she believed she had earned through decades of strategic social climbing and impeccable event planning. Harrison's steel-blue eyes, however, did not find her. They searched the crowd with an intensity that made several guests shift uncomfortably in their seats. His gaze swept past the investment bankers and their trophy wives, past the politicians and the philanthropists, past the carefully curated tables of influence that Cordelia had spent months arranging. His eyes stopped at the kitchen doors. Her. A woman in a black catering uniform stood frozen near the service entrance, a silver tray balanced against her hip. The tray held delicate appetizers that had taken her 3 hours to prepare that morning, bite-sized portions of her grandmother's famous deviled eggs, elevated with truffle oil and microgreens. Lorraine Caldwell, Rain to everyone who knew her, felt the weight of 1,000 stares settle onto her shoulders. She was 54 years old, had survived a broken engagement, her mother's death, and the slow erosion of every dream she'd ever held for herself. She had learned to be invisible. It was safer that way. But Harrison Blackwell was looking at her as though she were the only person in the room, as though she were the only person who had ever existed. The tray slipped from her fingers. It crashed against the marble floor with a sound like shattering glass, and the spell broke. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cordelia's gracious smile flickered, then froze into something harder. Rain's daughter Naomi, working the event as floor coordinator, rushed toward her mother with fury already building in her eyes. But Rain couldn't move, because she knew those eyes. She had seen them before, desperate, hungry, hollow with shame, in the flickering light of her family's restaurant kitchen 25 years ago. She had fed those eyes. She had listened to the broken dreams behind them. She had offered comfort without expectation and kindness without conditions, because that was what her mother had taught her to do. And then he had disappeared, leaving nothing but a note and a name she had never forgotten. Harrison Blackwell. The homeless man she had saved was now one of the wealthiest people in America, and he had just announced to Manhattan's elite that she was the reason why. Cordelia recovered first. She always did. 23 years of marriage to a man who had never truly loved her had taught her to adapt, to pivot, to transform public humiliation into private leverage. She rose from her seat with the fluid grace of a woman who had practiced elegance until it became armor. "Darling," she said, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom, "what a touching tribute to your charitable nature, always so generous with the help." The words were designed to diminish, to reframe, to remind everyone present of the vast gulf between the Blackwell family and the hired staff. A few nervous laughs scattered through the crowd, but Harrison was already moving. He stepped away from the podium, ignoring the foundation director who tried to hand him the Crystal Award, ignoring his wife's calculated performance, ignoring everything except the woman standing amid the shattered remnants of her appetizer tray. Naomi intercepted him 3 feet from her mother. "Mr. Blackwell." Her voice was cold, professional, and carried the unmistakable undertone of a daughter protecting her mother from a perceived threat. "I apologize for the disruption. My team will have this cleaned up immediately. If you'll return to the stage." "Naomi Caldwell," Harrison said quietly. "You have your mother's eyes." Naomi's composure cracked for just a moment. "How do you know my name?" "I know a great deal about your family. I've spent 25 years trying to find you." His gaze moved past her, settling on Rain with an expression that seemed to hold decades of searching, hoping, and slowly dying disappointment. "I went back, 6 months after we met. The restaurant was gone. Your neighbors said your mother had gotten sick. No one knew where you'd moved. Rain's throat constricted. Her mother's stroke had been sudden, devastating, total. Within 2 weeks of that night, the night she'd fed a stranger who spoke of building hotels, she'd closed the restaurant, sold what she could, and moved her mother to Atlanta where her aunt could help with care. She had thought of him sometimes, the intense young man with the refined accent and the desperate eyes who had spoken of his dreams as though they were the only things keeping him alive. She had wondered what had happened to him, whether he had found his footing, whether anyone else had shown him kindness on his journey. She had never imagined this. "Mr. Blackwell," she began. "Harrison," he corrected. "You called me Harrison that night. You said it suited me better than Harry." The memory surfaced unbidden. Her mother's kitchen at midnight, 2 plates of leftover pot roast and mashed potatoes, a young man who had been too proud to admit he was starving until his hands shook too badly to hold the fork. "Harrison is a name for someone who's going to matter," she had told him. "Harry is a name for someone who's given up." She had forgotten saying that. He had remembered for a quarter century. "I need to clean this up," Rain whispered. "Please, I need to—" Harrison knelt. The collective intake of breath from the crowd was audible. A billionaire in a custom-tailored tuxedo, kneeling on a marble floor amid shattered porcelain and scattered food, beginning to gather the broken pieces with his bare hands. "Then I'll help," he said simply. Naomi grabbed her mother's arm. Mama, we should go." But Rain was watching Harrison's hands, strong, capable hands that had probably signed contracts worth more than her entire life's earnings, carefully collecting the remnants of her ruined appetizers as though they were precious. She remembered those hands differently, trembling, cold, curled around a coffee mug as though it were the only warmth in the world. She remembered pressing her own hands around them and saying, "You're going to be fine. I know it." She had believed it then. She wondered if she had been the only person who ever had. Chapter 2. 25 years. Earlier Memphis in October meant the last breath of summer clinging to the air, the trees starting to turn, and the restaurant closing late because Mama never could turn away a hungry soul. Rain Caldwell was 29 years old, engaged to a good man named Theodore, who worked at the bank and brought her flowers every Friday, and absolutely certain she knew what her life would look like. She would marry Teddy. She would take over Mama's restaurant. She would have children who would learn to make cornbread from scratch and understand that food was love made tangible. She would grow old in the city, surrounded by family, content. It was a good plan, a simple plan. And then, at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, the back door opened. Rain was alone in the kitchen, scrubbing pots while her mother finished closing out the register. The back door was supposed to be locked. She could have sworn she'd checked it, but the man standing in the doorway didn't look like a threat. He looked like something broken. He was young, early 30s maybe, with dark hair that might have been well-groomed once but now hung limp and unwashed. His clothes were expensive beneath the wrinkles and stains, a button-down shirt that had probably cost more than her weekly wages, slacks that had been tailored to fit a body that had since grown gaunt with hunger. His eyes, though. His eyes were what stopped her from screaming, steel blue and absolutely hollow. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice cracked on the second word. "I'm sorry, I saw the light. I haven't—" His knees buckled. Rain caught him before he hit the floor. He weighed almost nothing. 20 minutes later, he was seated at the prep table with a plate of pot roast in front of him and tears streaming silently down his face. "Slowly," Rain said, refilling his water glass. "You'll make yourself sick if you eat too fast." "I know." He forced himself to set down the fork, though his hands were shaking with the effort of restraint. "I know. It's been 3 days. 3 days without food." Rain's throat tightened with something that might have been anger if it hadn't been so thoroughly swamped by compassion. "What happened to you?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I trusted the wrong person, signed the wrong documents, woke up one morning to discover that my business partner had liquidated everything and disappeared to a country with no extradition treaty." He picked up the fork again, then set it down. "I was going to build hotels, luxury hotels that actually cared about their guests instead of just their profit margins. I had investors. I had a vision. His voice broke. "I had nothing," he finished. "I have nothing. My family won't speak to me because I embarrassed them by failing. My fiancée left when the money did. I've been living in my car for 2 weeks, and 3 days ago, someone stole it while I was sleeping in a shelter." He looked up at her with those devastating eyes. "I walked here from the interstate. I don't even know where here is." "Memphis," Rain said softly. "You're in Memphis." "Memphis." He tested the word like it might have hidden meaning. "I've never been to Memphis." "Well," Rain pushed his plate closer, "Memphis is glad to have you. Now eat." He ate. Rain watched him work through the pot roast, then a second helping, then a slice of her mother's peach cobbler that she'd been saving for breakfast. He ate like a man who had forgotten that food could be a comfort rather than just a necessity. When he finally set down his fork, some color had returned to his cheeks. "I'm going to pay you back," he said. "I know how that sounds, coming from someone who doesn't even own the clothes on his back anymore. But I'm going to. Someday I'm going to walk back into this kitchen, and I'm going to—" "You're going to do no such thing." Rain began clearing his plates. "Kindness doesn't need a receipt, Mr. Blackwell, Harrison Blackwell." "Mr. Blackwell, Harrison." She tested the name, found it suited him. "Harrison is a name for someone who's going to matter, not Harry. Harrison, you don't look like a man who's given up." "I have," he said quietly. "I've given up." "No." Rain set down the plates and turned to face him fully. "Giving up looks different. Giving up doesn't walk 5 miles from the interstate looking for a light in the dark. Giving up doesn't say, 'I'm going to pay you back.' Giving up looks like surrender, and you—" She reached out and took his hands in hers. They were cold. She wrapped her warm fingers around them and held on. "You look like someone who's still fighting, even when you don't know what you're fighting for." Harrison stared at their joined hands. "I don't even know your name," he whispered. "Lorraine. Rain. To my friends." She squeezed his hands once, then released them. "And you're going to sleep here tonight. We have a cot in the storage room. In the morning, my mom is going to feed you breakfast, and then we're going to figure out your next step. Together." "Why?" The question seemed to tear out of him. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Rain smiled, her mother's smile, warm and certain and brooking no argument. "Because someone did it for my grandfather when he had nothing. Because kindness is the only currency that actually multiplies when you spend it. Because—" she paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Because I believe you're going to build those hotels someday, and when you do, I want you to remember that you didn't do it alone, that somewhere along the way, someone believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself." Harrison's eyes filled with tears again, but this time, he was smiling. He was gone by morning. Rain found the note tucked under her coffee mug, a single sheet of paper torn from the notebook her mother used for inventory, covered in precise handwriting. "Lorraine, I don't have words for what you gave me last night. Not the food, though. That saved my body. You saved something more important. You reminded me that I was worth saving. I meant what I said. Someday, I will repay this. Not because kindness needs a receipt, but because you deserve to know that your faith wasn't misplaced. If I succeed, when I succeed, I'll find you. I promise. Until then, thank you. For everything. Harrison Blackwell." Rain read the note 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, tucked it into her apron pocket, and went to help her mother open the restaurant for breakfast. 6 months later, Dorothy Caldwell suffered a massive stroke. Rain closed the restaurant within 2 weeks. There was no one else to run it, no one else to care for her mother, no one else to hold their small family together while everything fell apart. Theodore offered to help, but his help came with conditions: sell the building, move Dorothy to a care facility, focus on their wedding, start their life. He couldn't understand why Rain would sacrifice everything for a woman who might never recover. Rain ended their engagement on a Thursday afternoon. By Friday morning, she and her mother were on a train to Atlanta. She never saw Theodore again. She never saw Harrison Blackwell either. And over the years, as her mother slowly improved and then slowly declined and then finally, peacefully passed away, Rain sometimes wondered if she had imagined the whole thing. A desperate man in her kitchen, a meal shared in silence, a promise made in the dark. Surely if Harrison Blackwell had ever found success, he would have kept his word. Surely if he had become someone who mattered, he would have come back. But the years passed and no one came, and eventually Rain stopped wondering. She built a life instead, a small catering business, a modest apartment, a daughter who had grown into a fierce, protective, brilliant woman. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was enough. It had to be enough. And then, on a Tuesday evening in October, 25 years to the day since a broken man had stumbled into her mother's kitchen, Lorraine Caldwell looked up across a glittering Manhattan ballroom and saw those steel blue eyes again, still intense, still searching, finally finding. Chapter 3. The service entrance of the Grand Meridian Hotel was not designed for emotional revelations. It was designed for efficiency. A stark corridor of industrial tile and fluorescent lighting where caterers loaded and unloaded, where servers grabbed smoke breaks between courses, where the invisible machinery of luxury hospitality churned away far from the eyes of guests who preferred not to think about such things. Rain sat on an overturned milk crate, her hands still shaking, while Naomi paced the narrow hallway like a caged lioness. "We're leaving," Naomi declared for the fourth time. "Right now. We pack up our equipment, we invoice them for the full amount plus damages, and we never speak of this again." "We signed a contract," Rain said wearily. "If we leave before service is complete—" "Service is complete, Mama. That man, that billionaire, just told a room full of people that you're the reason for his success. If that's not the end of service, I don't know what is." The service door swung open. Harrison Blackwell stepped through, still in his tuxedo, still carrying the presence that had commanded a ballroom of Manhattan's elite. Behind him, the sounds of the gala filtered through, music resuming, conversation buzzing, the great machine of high society grinding back into motion as though nothing had happened. Naomi placed herself between Harrison and her mother. "Mr. Blackwell, you need to return to your event." "My event?" Harrison's voice was flat. "You mean the celebration of everything I've built, the life I've constructed?" He looked past Naomi to where Rain sat, fragile and frozen. "That's not my event anymore. That stopped being mine the moment I saw her face." "That's very poetic." Naomi crossed her arms. "It's also very convenient. My mother spent 25 years building her life without you. She doesn't need some billionaire white knight riding into—" "Naomi." Rain's voice was soft, but it carried the unmistakable weight of maternal authority. "Let me talk to him." "Mama, please." Naomi's jaw tightened. She looked between her mother and Harrison for a long moment, clearly weighing whether to obey or override. 5 minutes, she finally said. "I'll be right outside this door. If I hear raised voices, if I see any sign that you're uncomfortable, you'll rescue me." Rain managed a small smile. "I know, baby, it's what you do." Naomi shot Harrison one more warning look, then disappeared through the service door. Silence settled over the corridor. Harrison took a careful step forward. "May I sit?" Rain gestured to another overturned crate. He sat. They faced each other. Across 3 feet of industrial tile, separated by 25 years of diverging lives and convergent longing. "I looked for you," Harrison said finally. "That's not a line. It's not something I'm saying to excuse myself or to make this moment more dramatic. It's just, I need you to know that. I came back. 6 months after that night in your kitchen, I had enough money to travel. First thing I did was buy a bus ticket to Memphis." Rain's hands twisted together in her lap. "My mother had a stroke 2 weeks after you left. I had to close the restaurant, move her to Atlanta. I know. I found out eventually." Harrison's voice cracked slightly. "I spent 6 months trying to track you down. I went to the restaurant, boarded up. I talked to neighbors, scattered. I searched every Caldwell in Georgia, but you weren't listed because you were using your mother's surname and I didn't know her first name and—" He stopped, breathed. "I kept trying, for years. But I didn't know your mother's name. I didn't know your daughter's name. All I had was Rain Caldwell from Memphis, and there was no one with that name in any database I could access." "Dorothy," Rain whispered. "My mother's name was Dorothy." Dorothy. Harrison closed his eyes as though committing it to memory. If I had known that. If I had just asked one more question that night. You were starving. You were broken. You weren't exactly in a state to be conducting thorough interviews. I should have been. I should have gotten every piece of information I could because I knew. Harrison opened his eyes. "I knew that night, Rain. I knew you were going to matter. I didn't know how or why or what form it would take, but I knew that meeting you was significant, that you were significant, and then I lost you anyway. Rain stared at her hands. I thought you forgot. Forgot? The word came out rough, almost wounded. Rain, I built an empire on the foundation of that single night. Every hotel I've ever opened has a portrait of an empty plate in the lobby. Do you know why? Because I never wanted to forget what hunger felt like, what desperation felt like, what it meant to be shown kindness when you had absolutely no right to expect it. Rain looked up. Every restaurant in my hotels serves a version of your mother's peach cobbler. Different variations, different chefs, but the core recipe. I begged that from an old soul food cookbook in the Atlanta library because I was trying to find any connection to you I could. I've been carrying you with me for 25 years, even when I couldn't find you. Harrison, my wife thinks she made me. His voice went flat again. Cordelia. She met me after the first hotel succeeded, after I'd already pulled myself out of the pit. She saw a rising star and attached herself to it. We've been married for 23 years, and she has never once asked me where I came from, who I was before she knew me, what made me who I am. He reached out, slowly, carefully, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed hers, and the touch was electric. You knew me when I was nothing, Harrison said quietly, and you told me I was going to matter. That's not something you forget. That's not something you move on from. That's something you spend the rest of your life trying to live up to. Rain felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She hadn't cried in years, not since her mother's funeral. She had learned to be strong, to be practical, to be the immovable foundation her daughter needed. But Harrison Blackwell was looking at her the same way he had looked at her in that kitchen 25 years ago, as though she were the answer to every question he'd ever asked, and she was so tired of being strong. I thought about you, she admitted, when Mama died, when Naomi was born. When I signed the papers to start my business, I wondered what happened to the man in my kitchen, whether he ever built his hotels, whether he ever found someone else to believe in him. Harrison's hand covered hers completely. I found people who invested in me, people who partnered with me, people who married me. His grip tightened slightly. But I never found another you. I never found anyone who saw me, really saw me, the way you did that night. The service corridor felt suddenly warmer, closer, charged with something neither of them had expected to feel again. Rain looked at their joined hands, her brown fingers intertwined with his pale ones, and thought about all the years she had spent convincing herself that love was a luxury she couldn't afford. That passion was for younger women with simpler lives, that 54 was too old for second chances. Harrison Blackwell was sitting in a service corridor, still in his custom tuxedo, holding her hand as though she were the most precious thing in his universe. Maybe 54 wasn't too old after all. I should go back in there, Harrison said, though he made no move to stand. I should finish the speech, accept the award, perform the role everyone expects me to play. Should you? He met her eyes. What I should do and what I want to do have been different things for a very long time. What do you want to do? The question hung between them. I want to stay here, Harrison said slowly, in this corridor, holding your hand, pretending that the last 25 years were a dream I'm finally waking up from. Rain laughed, a real laugh, rusty with disuse. That's impractical. I know. Your wife is out there. I know. The entire New York social scene is out there, waiting to watch what you do next. I know. Harrison's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. But for right now, for this moment, all I want is to sit here with Lorraine Caldwell from Memphis and remember what it felt like to believe that the future could hold something good. The service door opened. Naomi's head appeared. Time's up. Mr. Blackwell, your wife is asking for you. Rather loudly. Harrison didn't let go of Rain's hand. Tell her I'll be right there. I'm not your secretary. No, you're her daughter. Harrison finally released Rain's fingers, stood, straightened his tuxedo. You're protective and fierce, and probably want to throw me into traffic right now, but I need you to know something, Naomi. I'm not here to disrupt your mother's life. I'm not here to sweep in and fix things that don't need fixing. Then why are you here? Harrison looked at Rain one more time. Because I made a promise 25 years ago, and I always keep my promises. He walked past Naomi and disappeared through the service door. Naomi stared at her mother. What just happened? Rain looked at her hands, still warm where Harrison had held them, and wondered the same thing. Chapter 4. Cordelia Blackwell née Patterson had not clawed her way out of a middle-class New Jersey childhood to be humiliated by a caterer. Her penthouse office, a private sanctuary on the 87th floor of the Blackwell Tower, was decorated entirely in shades of white and platinum. It was the office of a woman who had systematically erased every trace of her origins, who had reinvented herself so completely that even her childhood friends wouldn't recognize her anymore. Not that she had childhood friends. Friends were a liability. Friends remembered things. I want everything, she said to the man across from her desk. The house in the Hamptons, the apartment in Paris, the yacht, the art collection, and I want her destroyed. Gerald Morton, senior partner at Morton, Chase & Associates, had handled dozens of high-profile divorces. He had seen rage before. He had seen calculated fury. But something about Cordelia Blackwell's cold determination made him want to check the emergency exits. Mrs. Blackwell, New York is an equitable distribution state. Whatever assets were acquired during the marriage, I don't care about equitable distribution. Cordelia's fingers drummed against her glass desktop. I care about winning. Harry embarrassed me in front of 1,000 people. He announced to the entire Manhattan social register that some cook was the reason for his success. After everything I've done for him, after every dinner party I've planned, every connection I've cultivated, every scandal I've buried. With respect, Gerald interrupted carefully, I need to know what exactly happened between Mr. Blackwell and this woman. If there's been infidelity, the court may consider. There's been nothing. The admission seemed to cost Cordelia something. Not yet. Believe me, I would know. I've had Harry under surveillance for years. This woman, this Lorraine Caldwell. He met her once, 25 years ago, before we were married. She apparently gave him a meal when he was going through his unfortunate period. Gerald's eyebrows rose. One meal? 25 years ago? And he just publicly credited her with his success? He's lost his mind. Clearly. Cordelia stood, pacing to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Manhattan. Or he's having some kind of midlife crisis. Either way, I need to control the narrative. I need to remind him and everyone else that I am Mrs. Harrison Blackwell, not some nobody caterer from Memphis. What exactly do you want me to do? Cordelia turned back to face him, and her smile was the most frightening thing Gerald had ever seen. Find everything there is to find about Lorraine Caldwell, her finances, her relationships, her family, every mistake she's ever made, every corner she's ever cut, every weakness I can exploit. She returned to her desk, pulled out a checkbook. I'm also hiring a private investigator, someone discreet, someone who understands that results are more important than methods. Mrs. Blackwell, I have to advise you that certain methods of investigation could expose you to. Gerald, Cordelia's voice was ice. You're my lawyer. You're paid extremely well to find legal ways to accomplish my goals. If those legal ways happen to be creative, then that's why I'm paying you an 8-figure retainer. Find me something. Find me anything. I want that woman neutralized before she has a chance to become a problem. Gerald hesitated. Then he nodded. I'll make some calls. Do that. Cordelia picked up her phone. And Gerald? This conversation never happened. Of course, Mrs. Blackwell. After he left, Cordelia stared at her reflection in the darkened window. Behind her, the vast expanse of Harrison's empire glittered in the Manhattan night. Hotels, restaurants, office buildings, each one a monument to a success she had convinced herself she deserved a share of. She had spent 23 years building a life on the foundation of Harrison Blackwell's wealth. She had endured his emotional distance, his long silences, his obvious lack of passion for her. She had told herself that passion was overrated, that partnership was what mattered, that she could learn to be happy with what she had. And now, some woman from his past was threatening everything. Cordelia's fingers tightened on her phone. She would not be dismissed. She would not be replaced. And Lorraine Caldwell would learn, painfully, thoroughly, completely, what happened to women who tried to take what belonged to Cordelia Blackwell. Chapter 5. Marcus Webb had known Harrison Blackwell for 32 years. He had been Harrison's first investor when no one else would take a chance on a young man with grand visions and no capital. He had served as best man at Harrison's wedding, an honor he'd accepted, even though he'd known Cordelia Patterson was entirely wrong for his friend. He had watched Harrison build an empire while slowly losing himself inside of it. And now, sitting in Harrison's private office the morning after the gala, Marcus was finally hearing the truth. "You really went back for her," Marcus said, 6 months later. Of course I went back." Harrison stood at his window, staring down at the city he owned significant portions of. "She saved my life, Marcus, not metaphorically, literally. I was 3 days from dying on that street. I'd given up. I was walking toward the river when I saw her light. And she just took you in? She fed me her mother's pot roast. She gave me a place to sleep. She held my hands when I couldn't stop shaking and told me I was going to matter." Harrison's voice cracked slightly. "No one had ever believed in me like that. Not my family. They only cared about the family reputation. Not my ex-fiancée. She only cared about my potential earnings. Just Rain, a stranger who saw a broken man and treated him like he was worth saving." Marcus processed this. He had known the broad strokes. Harrison occasionally mentioned a formative experience during his dark period, but never the details. "So what now?" he asked carefully. "You publicly credited her with your success. Cora's going to retaliate. The press is going to dig into every corner of this woman's life. And you're a married man, Harry. Whatever you felt for her 25 years ago, I'm filing for divorce." The words hung in the air. "Harry, I should have done it years ago." Harrison finally turned away from the window. "I married Cordelia because I thought I was supposed to. She was polished and connected, and she wanted me. I told myself that was enough, that I couldn't expect to find what I'd felt in that kitchen again, that kind of immediate recognition, that sense of coming home to someone I'd never met before. And now? Now I've found her again." Harrison's jaw set. "I'm not losing her twice." Marcus studied his old friend. He had seen Harrison make hard decisions before, hostile takeovers, difficult terminations, deals that kept him awake at night. But he had never seen him look like this, like a man who had finally remembered who he wanted to be. "She's going to fight you," Marcus warned. "Cora, she's got access to the best lawyers in the city, and she's going to paint this as a midlife crisis at best, a sordid affair at worst." "I know. The press will have a field day. Billionaire leaves wife for Caterer. That's going to be the headline." "I know. And Rain, have you even asked what she wants? You've been searching for her for 25 years, but she built a life too. A daughter, a business. You might be ready to blow up your world for her, but that doesn't mean she wants to be the match." Harrison was silent for a long moment. "I'm going to ask her," he finally said. "I'm going to tell her everything, what I felt then, what I feel now, what I want the future to look like. And then I'm going to respect whatever she decides. But I'm not going to pretend anymore, Marcus. I'm not going to keep living a life I should have left years ago." Marcus nodded slowly. "All right. Then we should start preparing. I'll reach out to our legal team. Get ahead of whatever Cora's planning. And I should probably tell you," he hesitated. "Tell me what?" "My investigator says Cora's already hired her own. She's looking into Lorraine's background, her business, her daughter. Anything she can use as leverage." Harrison's expression went cold in a way Marcus had rarely seen. "Get me the name of that investigator, and prepare a response team. I won't let her hurt Rain. Harry, I spent 25 years building hotels because Rain made me believe I could. I spent 23 years in a loveless marriage because I was too much of a coward to leave. I'm done with cowardice." Harrison moved toward his desk, pulling out his phone. "Call the lawyers, start the paperwork, and arrange for security detail on Lorraine Caldwell and her daughter." "Security detail? Cora doesn't fight fair. I won't take any chances." Harrison's eyes met Marcus's. "I failed to protect Rain once by not asking enough questions. I won't fail her again." Chapter 6. The Waverly Foundation. Spring luncheon was exactly the kind of event Rain usually worked invisibly. She would arrive through the service entrance, set up her chafing dishes and serving stations, prepare elegant plates that looked like artwork, and leave before the guests finished their dessert. She was a ghost, skilled, reliable, and utterly forgettable. But today, the guests were staring. Word had spread through Manhattan's social networks with the speed of wildfire. Everyone knew about Harrison Blackwell's bizarre announcement. Everyone knew about the caterer he had publicly credited with his success. And everyone wanted to see her for themselves. Rain kept her head down and focused on her work. "Mama," Naomi appeared at her elbow, phone in hand. "We've got a problem." "Another cancellation?" 3 clients had called that morning to terminate their contracts, citing vague concerns about scheduling conflicts. Rain knew the truth. Cordelia Blackwell's influence was already spreading through the circles that could afford her services. Worse, he's here. Rain's hand stilled on the serving spoon. "The Blackwell Foundation didn't RSVP for this event," she said carefully. "They're at a different venue today." "He's not here for the foundation. He's here for you." Naomi's expression was equal parts protectiveness and reluctant curiosity. "He's waiting in the garden, said he won't approach you inside, doesn't want to cause another scene, but he'd like to talk if you're willing." Rain looked at the crowd of well-dressed women pretending not to watch her. "Cover the service for 10 minutes. "Mama, 10 minutes, Naomi. I'll be careful." The garden behind the Waverly Mansion was a masterpiece of controlled beauty. Topiaries shaped into perfect spheres, rose bushes in colors that seemed almost artificial in their perfection, stone paths winding through arrangements that never dared look wild. Harrison sat on a wrought iron bench beneath an ancient oak, the single uncontrolled element in the entire space. He looked different in daylight, less like the polished billionaire from the gala, more like the man she remembered from 25 years ago. His suit jacket was off, his sleeves rolled up, his silver hair slightly disordered, as though he'd been running his hands through it. She remembered him running his hands through different hair, dark, unwashed, hanging limp with exhaustion. She remembered wanting to wash it for him. "You found me again," she said, taking a seat on the opposite end of the bench. "I'll always find you now." There was no dramatics in his voice, just quiet certainty. "I spent 25 years failing at that. I don't intend to fail again." "Harrison, let me say something first. Please." She nodded. "I know this is overwhelming. I know I dropped a bomb on your life at that gala. I know my wife is already working to make your life difficult. I've heard about the cancellations, and I'm working to counteract that. You don't need to. I know I don't need to. That's not why I'm doing it." He turned to face her fully. "I'm doing it because I failed you once. I made a promise that night in your kitchen, and then I disappeared. Not because I wanted to, but the result was the same. You spent 25 years thinking I forgot you, and that's my fault. You didn't know where I went. I should have tried harder, asked more questions, stayed longer before I left that night, at least long enough to learn your mother's name." His voice was rough. "I was so focused on my shame, on proving I could succeed, that I let the search become secondary to the building. I told myself I'd find you when I was worthy of you, and then I kept moving the goalposts on what worthy meant." Rain was quiet for a long moment. "What happened to your mother?" Harrison asked gently. "After the stroke?" "She recovered, mostly. Enough to live at home, to talk, to tell stories about the old days." Rain's eyes stung. "She died 8 years ago, peacefully, with me beside her." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She had a good life, a full life. She got to meet her granddaughter, teach her how to make cornbread, tell her stories about Memphis." A small smile crossed Rain's face. "She would have liked you. She always did have a soft spot for strays." Harrison's laugh was surprised and genuine. "A stray? That's exactly what I was." "You still are in some ways," Rain studied him. "A stray who built an empire but never found a home." The words landed between them with unexpected weight. "Is that what you see?" Harrison asked quietly. "When you look at me?" "I see the same man who sat in my mama's kitchen 25 years ago. Older, more polished, carrying more weight on his shoulders, but still searching." She paused. "Still hungry, even when you're not starving anymore." Harrison was silent. "What are you hungry for, Harrison Blackwell? You have money, power, influence. You have a wife who—" "I don't have a wife anymore." "Not really." His voice was flat. "I have a business partner who shares my last name and my homes. We haven't been intimate in over a decade. We don't even have dinner together unless there's a press opportunity. The marriage ended years ago. I just didn't have the courage to admit it. Why not? Because leaving Cordelia meant admitting I'd wasted 23 years of my life. It meant acknowledging that I'd married the wrong woman for the wrong reasons and been too cowardly to correct the mistake. He looked at her directly. And because some part of me was still waiting, still hoping, still believing that you were out there somewhere, and that if I was patient enough, fate would bring you back to me. Rain's heart was beating too fast. That's a long time to wait for a woman you met once. You weren't just a woman I met once. Harrison's hand moved across the bench, stopping just short of touching hers. You were a turning point, a transformation. You were the moment I stopped being a man who was going to die on the streets and became a man who was going to build something worth building. I just fed you dinner. You did more than that. You saw me. His fingers brushed hers, just barely, a question rather than a demand. Do you know how rare that is? For someone to look at a broken stranger and see potential instead of pathology? To offer kindness instead of judgment? Rain turned her hand over. Their palms touched. The contact was electric, not dramatic, not overwhelming, but profound in its simplicity. Two hands, palm to palm, after 25 years of wondering. I thought about you too, Rain admitted quietly. When Mama died, when Naomi started high school, when I signed the papers for my business, I wondered what happened to the man in my kitchen, whether you were alive, whether you were happy. I was alive, Harrison's fingers curled around hers. I was never happy, not the way I wanted to be. Because of your wife? Because I knew something was missing, someone. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I've spent 2 decades building hotels that feel like homes, trying to recreate the sensation I had in your mother's kitchen that night, the warmth, the safety, the sense that I belonged somewhere. And did you? Recreate it? Never. Not once. His eyes met hers. Until I saw you across that ballroom. The words should have sounded like lines, practiced, polished, designed to manipulate. But Harrison Blackwell was looking at her with such naked honesty that Rain couldn't doubt him. He meant every word. And more terrifying than that, she believed him. Your daughter hates me, Harrison observed, without releasing her hand. She doesn't hate you. She's protecting me. From what? From a billionaire who could destroy my life on a whim. From a man who made a promise 25 years ago and disappeared. From, Rain hesitated, from hoping for something I told myself I'd stopped wanting. What did you stop wanting? The question was so gentle, so careful, that Rain felt her walls crumbling despite herself. A partner. Someone who saw me, not just the caterer, not just the caregiver, not just the strong one who holds everything together. Someone who wanted to know who I was underneath all the roles I play. Who are you? Underneath? Rain looked at their joined hands. I'm tired, she admitted. I'm 54 years old and I've spent my whole life taking care of other people. My mother, my daughter, my clients. I don't regret any of it. Those choices were mine and I'd make them again. But sometimes I wonder what my life would have looked like if I'd ever put myself first. What would putting yourself first look like? I don't know anymore. I used to have dreams, opening my own restaurant, teaching cooking classes, maybe writing a cookbook of Mama's recipes. But those dreams got smaller every year, until eventually I stopped dreaming entirely. Harrison's grip tightened on her hand. What if I could help you dream again? Harrison, I'm not talking about rescuing you. I'm not talking about swooping in and fixing your life. His voice was urgent now, intense. I'm talking about partnership, about two people who both know what it means to build something from nothing, about moving too fast. The words stopped him cold. Rain pulled her hand back, gently but definitively. You're still married. I've got 3 clients trying to cancel their contracts because your wife is threatened by my existence. I've got a daughter who's terrified that I'm going to get hurt by someone with 1,000 times more power than I have. She stood. This is not a fairy tale, Harrison. This is real life. And in real life, declarations of devotion in garden settings don't solve problems. They create them. Harrison stood too. Then tell me what solves problems. Tell me what you need, and I'll do it. I need time, space, The ability to make my own decisions without feeling like I'm being swept up in a billionaire's midlife crisis. That's not what this is. I believe you believe that. But you've been looking for me for 25 years. You've built me up in your mind into something I might not actually be. The woman you remember from that kitchen was 29 years old with a fiancé and a dream of running her mother's restaurant. That woman is gone. The woman standing here is 54, divorced from a life she barely remembers, and very, very tired of being someone else's answer to something. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. "Then I'll wait," he finally said. "I'll give you all the time you need. I'll handle Cordelia and whatever games she's playing. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll still be here. You can't put your life on hold for me. My life has been on hold for 25 years. He smiled, sad and certain. "Waiting for you a little longer is nothing compared to that." Rain didn't have an answer. She turned and walked back toward the luncheon, leaving Harrison standing alone beneath the ancient oak. But she couldn't help looking back once. He was still there, still watching her, still waiting. Chapter 7. The invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. "Mrs. Cordelia Blackwell requests the pleasure of your company for an intimate gathering at the Blackwell penthouse. Saturday evening, 7 o'clock. Formal attire requested." Naomi intercepted it before Rain could respond. Absolutely not. It could be legitimate, a peace offering. "Mama." Naomi set down the invitation with the kind of deliberate care that meant she was trying very hard not to crumple it into a ball. "That woman has spent the past 2 weeks systematically destroying your client list. She's the reason the Metropolitan Museum canceled your contract for their spring gala. She's the reason the Manhattan Women's Foundation suddenly decided to go in a different direction. She's not inviting you to her penthouse for tea and reconciliation." "Then why is she inviting me?" "To humiliate you, to threaten you, to make sure you understand exactly how much power she has and how little you have." Naomi crossed her arms. "I've been doing research. Cordelia Blackwell née Patterson has a reputation in the society circles. She's vindictive, she's patient, and she never forgets a slight. You didn't slight her, you just existed, but she's treating you like an enemy combatant." Rain picked up the invitation, studying the expensive cardstock. "I'm going." "Mama, if she wants to threaten me, she can do it to my face. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life hiding from a woman whose only crime is being married to a man who once ate my pot roast. Her crime is being a vindictive snake who's trying to ruin your business. Then I'll find out exactly how far she's willing to go." Rain set down the invitation. "And maybe, just maybe, I can make her understand that I'm not a threat, that whatever happened between me and Harrison 25 years ago was a single night of kindness, that I didn't seek him out, didn't want this attention, and would be perfectly happy to go back to my invisible life if she'd just stop trying to destroy it." Naomi's expression said she doubted any of this would work, but she also knew that arguing with her mother was usually pointless. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. If you're walking into the lion's den, you're not walking in alone. She invited me, not us. If I show up with backup, she'll see it as an escalation." "Good. It is an escalation." Naomi grabbed her phone. "I'm also telling Harrison." "Naomi. He should know his wife is playing games. He's in a better position to counter whatever she's planning than either of us." Naomi was already typing. "If you're going to be reckless, I'm going to be strategic." Rain looked at her daughter, fierce, protective, brilliant, and felt a surge of pride that temporarily overwhelmed her anxiety. "When did you become the one managing me? When you started accepting invitations from women who want to destroy you." Naomi hit send. "Now let's talk about what you're going to wear. If you're walking into a penthouse to face down a socialite, you're going to look absolutely stunning while you do it." The Blackwell penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building that bore the family name. Rain had dressed carefully, a vintage Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress in deep burgundy, her mother's pearl earrings, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo that Naomi had insisted on. She wasn't trying to compete with Cordelia's designer wardrobe, she was simply refusing to look intimidated. The elevator opened directly into the apartment. White. Everything was white. White marble floors, white walls, white furniture that looked expensive and deeply uncomfortable. It was the most sterile living space Rain had ever seen, a showroom rather than a home. Cordelia stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of champagne in her hand, wearing a white Dior dress that probably cost more than Rain's monthly rent. "Mrs. Caldwell." Her smile was flawless and completely empty. "How lovely of you to accept my invitation." "Mrs. Blackwell." Rain remained near the elevator, unwilling to venture too far into enemy territory. "Though I admit I'm curious about the purpose." "The purpose?" Cordelia gestured toward a white sofa. "Please sit. Can I offer you champagne?" "I'd rather stand, thank you." A flash of irritation crossed Cordelia's face, quickly suppressed. "Very well, I'll be direct." She set down her champagne and approached Rain with the deliberate grace of a predator. "You've been sleeping with my husband." "I haven't. You've been meeting with him privately. Once, in a garden, for 10 minutes. You've been in contact with him. He's contacted me. I've responded because ignoring a billionaire seemed unwise. And yet..." Cordelia stopped 3 feet away, close enough to be threatening, far enough to maintain the illusion of civility. "Here you are, in my home, accepting my invitation. If you truly wanted nothing to do with my husband, you could have simply stayed away. I'm here because you've been destroying my business." Rain's voice was calm, though her heart was racing. 3 major clients canceled in 2 weeks. All of them mentioned vague concerns that they couldn't specify. I'm not naive enough to think that's coincidence. "Of course it isn't." Cordelia's smile widened. "You made yourself a problem, Mrs. Caldwell. My husband announced to 1,000 of Manhattan's most influential people that you, a caterer, were the reason for his success. That's not something that goes away quietly. That's not something I can allow to stand. What do you want?" "I want you gone." Cordelia turned and walked to her desk, returning with a cream-colored envelope. "This contains a non-disclosure agreement and a check for $500,000. You sign the agreement, you take the check, and you disappear. Move to Florida, move to California, I don't care where. Just stop existing in my husband's orbit." Rain didn't reach for the envelope. "And if I refuse? Then I continue what I've started. Your business, such as it is, will be effectively blacklisted from every major event in the city within 6 months. Your daughter's event coordination work will become complicated, and I'll make very sure that your name becomes synonymous with scandal rather than cuisine. You'd destroy an innocent woman's career because your husband mentioned her in a speech? I'd protect my marriage." Cordelia's mask slipped slightly, revealing something raw underneath. 23 years, Mrs. Caldwell. I've given 23 years to building this life, this name, this position. I won't be set aside for a woman who served him pot roast." "Then you're fighting the wrong battle." Rain's quiet response seemed to throw Cordelia off balance. "Excuse me. I'm not trying to take your husband. I'm not interested in being Mrs. Harrison Blackwell. I'm a 54-year-old woman with a small catering business and a daughter I'd die for. That's my life. That's what I want." Rain met Cordelia's eyes directly. "Whatever Harrison feels or thinks he feels, that's between you and him. I'm not your enemy." "How naive." Cordelia's voice hardened. "You think feelings don't matter? You think 25 years of obsession will simply evaporate because you decline to participate? My husband has been looking for you since before we were married. He's been dreaming about you while lying next to me. You're not the threat, Mrs. Caldwell. You're the symptom. But symptoms are what you treat when you can't cure the disease." She thrust the envelope toward Rain. "Take the money, sign the paper, save yourself and your daughter a great deal of pain." Rain looked at the envelope. Then she looked at Cordelia, this immaculate, terrified woman in her white fortress, desperately trying to hold on to something that had been slipping away for decades. "I'm not for sale," Rain said quietly. "I never was." She turned toward the elevator. "Then I'll destroy you." Cordelia's voice was ice. "I have resources you can't imagine, connections you'll never access, and a willingness to do whatever it takes to protect what's mine. You've made yourself my enemy, Mrs. Caldwell. I hope you're prepared for what comes next." The elevator doors opened. Harrison stood inside. His face was thunderous. "Cordelia!" Harrison's voice was flat, controlled, and absolutely terrifying. "Step away from her." Cordelia recovered quickly. Harry, what a surprise. I wasn't expecting... I'm sure you weren't. Harrison stepped out of the elevator, positioning himself between his wife and Rain. I received a very informative text message about this intimate gathering. Would you like to explain why you're offering half a CET port? $1 million to the woman I credit with saving my life? She's a distraction, a complication. I was simply... You were threatening her. Harrison's control cracked slightly. I saw the check on your desk, Cora. I heard what you said about destroying her business and her daughter's career. I was protecting our marriage. We don't have a marriage. The words fell like stones. We have an arrangement, a business partnership with shared real estate and a legal contract. That's all we've had for years, and we both know it. Harry, I'm done. Harrison turned to face Rain, his expression softening. Are you all right? I'm fine. I heard what she was doing. I'm so sorry. This is exactly what I was trying to prevent. You can't prevent me from protecting myself. Cordelia's voice rose. You humiliated me in front of 1,000 people, Harry. You announced to the entire world that some caterer was more important to you than your own wife. She is. Silence. She's more important to you than I am. Cordelia's voice was hollow. That's what you're saying. I'm saying that I've spent 23 years pretending, and I can't pretend anymore. Harrison's hand found Rain's, a solid grounding touch. I'm filing for divorce, Cordelia, tomorrow morning. You'll get a generous settlement, everything you're entitled to and more. But our marriage is over. Because of her. Because of me. Because I never should have married you in the first place. Because I was a coward who settled for good enough when I knew, I've always known, that there was someone out there who actually saw me. Harrison's grip on Rain's hand tightened. You can fight this, Cora. You can drag it through the courts, leak stories to the press, try to make both our lives miserable. But it won't change anything. I'm done. We're done. And if you continue threatening Rain or her daughter, I will use every resource at my disposal to ensure you regret it. Cordelia stared at their joined hands. For just a moment, something almost like grief crossed her face. Then it hardened back into rage. You'll lose everything, she hissed. I'll make sure of it. I already lost everything that mattered. Harrison's eyes never left Rain's face. 25 years ago, I won't lose her again. He turned toward the elevator, Rain's hand still in his. Let's go. Chapter 8. The headlines were as bad as predicted. Billionaire Blackwell abandons wife for mystery caterer. The pot roast that launched a divorce, inside Harrison Blackwell's shocking split. Rags to riches to ruins, how one meal destroyed a 23-year marriage. Rain read the articles on her phone while Naomi paced the small living room of their Brooklyn apartment. 18 cancellations, Naomi reported. 18 in 3 days. We've got exactly 4 clients left, and one of them is the senior center that pays in gratitude and leftover bingo prizes. It'll pass. Will it? Because Cordelia's publicity machine is working overtime. She's positioning herself as the wronged wife, the victim of her husband's unfortunate obsession with a servant. Naomi's voice dripped with contempt. Did you see the interview she gave to Page 6? She actually said you seduced a vulnerable man during his darkest hour. I fed him dinner. I know that. You know that. Everyone who matters knows that. But the court of public opinion doesn't care about facts. They care about narratives, and right now, her narrative is winning. Rain set down her phone. What would you have me do? Go to war with a billionaire's wife over a story neither of us can control. I'd have you fight back, give an interview, tell your side. And become part of the circus? Rain shook her head. I've spent my whole life staying out of the spotlight, Naomi. I'm not going to start performing now just because some society woman is threatened by my existence. So you're just going to let her win? I'm going to let her tire herself out. People like Cordelia need opposition to function. She's got no idea what to do with someone who simply refuses to engage. The doorbell rang. Naomi checked the security camera, a new addition, courtesy of Harrison's insistence on protection. It's Harrison. Let him in. Mama, let him in, Naomi. Naomi's expression said she disagreed, but she pressed the button to unlock the building's front door. 2 minutes later, Harrison Blackwell stood in their modest living room. looking entirely out of place amid the thrift store furniture and handmade quilts. But he didn't seem to notice the disparity between this space and his penthouse. He only saw Rain. "I came to apologize," he said. "Again. You've apologized enough. I can never apologize enough. This—" He gestured at the phone still showing the latest headline. "This is my fault. I made a public declaration without considering the consequences for you. I should have been more careful. You were being honest. I was being selfish. I wanted the world to know what you meant to me, and I didn't think about what the world would do with that information." Harrison moved toward her, but stopped before he got too close. "I've released a statement. Explained the full history, how we met, why you're important to my story, why this has nothing to do with infidelity and everything to do with a debt of kindness I've been trying to repay for 25 years. Will it help? Maybe, eventually." He hesitated. "But in the meantime, I've also arranged something more practical." "What kind of arrangement?" "I've spoken with several of my hotel managers. They're looking for new catering partnerships for their Manhattan properties, independent caterers with reputations for quality, discretion, and," a ghost of a smile, "extraordinary pot roast, if you're interested." Naomi's eyebrows rose. "You're offering us contracts with your hotels?" "I'm offering opportunities, no strings attached. If the work isn't up to standard, the contracts end. But based on what I remember of your mother's cooking," he looked at Rain, "I don't think that will be a problem." Rain was quiet for a long moment. "I don't want charity." "This isn't charity, it's business. Good business, in fact. I've seen the reviews for your catering. You're not just good, you're exceptional. The only reason you're not already working with luxury hotels is that you've never had an introduction to the right people." He paused. "Consider this an introduction. And what do you get out of it? The satisfaction of knowing I'm finally able to help you, instead of just making your life more complicated." Rain studied him, this powerful man standing in her small living room, offering opportunities without demanding anything in return. "No strings attached?" she repeated. "None. If you want to never see me again after this, the contracts will still stand. If you decide you hate me and everything I represent, you can still cater events at my hotels. Your business is separate from," he hesitated, "from whatever this is between us." "And what is this between us?" The question hung in the air. Harrison took a step closer. "I don't know yet. I know what I want it to be. But I also heard what you said in the garden, that you need time, space, the ability to make your own decisions. I'm trying to respect that. By coming to my apartment and offering me contracts, by ensuring you have options, choices, the ability to tell Cordelia Blackwell to go to hell without worrying about how you're going to pay your rent." He met her eyes. "I don't want to rescue you, Rain. I want to give you the resources to rescue yourself." Naomi, who had been watching this exchange with growing interest, cleared her throat. "I'll review the contracts," she said. "Mama, you should talk to him, privately. I'll be in my room." She disappeared down the hallway. Rain and Harrison stood alone in the small living room. "Sit down," Rain said finally. "I'll make coffee." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." She moved toward the tiny kitchen. "But I want to. And that's the point, isn't it? Doing things because we want to, not because we have to." Harrison sat on the old sofa, the same sofa where Rain had read stories to Naomi as a child, had consoled herself after her mother's funeral, had wondered what her life might have looked like if she'd made different choices. "Tell me about your mother," he said. Rain looked back at him. "Why?" "Because I never got to meet her. Because she raised a daughter who saved a stranger's life with pot roast and peach cobbler. Because," his voice softened, "because I want to know where you came from." Rain poured water into the coffee maker. "Her name was Dorothy Mae Caldwell. Born in Mississippi, raised in Memphis, never left the South until she moved to Atlanta to live with me after her stroke. She opened her restaurant in 1962, 6 months before I was born. My father died when I was 3. I don't really remember him, so it was always just me and Mama living above the restaurant, learning that food was how you showed love to people you couldn't find words for." "That sounds like a good childhood." "It was. Not perfect. Money was always tight and Mama worked herself to exhaustion. But it was good." Rain brought 2 mugs of coffee to the living room, handed one to Harrison, and sat in the armchair across from him. She taught me everything. How to cook, how to run a business, how to treat every customer like family even when they weren't treating you the same way. She sounds remarkable. She was. She was also stubborn, opinionated, and absolutely convinced she knew what was best for everyone. Rain smiled. I inherited all of those qualities. Is that a warning? It's information. She sipped her coffee. I'm not a passive woman, Harrison. I don't wait to be rescued, and I don't change my mind because someone powerful tells me I should. If you're interested in me, in whatever this is between us, you need to understand that I will make my own decisions, even when you disagree. I wouldn't want it any other way. Easy to say now. I mean it. Harrison set down his coffee mug and leaned forward. I've spent 23 years married to a woman who agreed with everything I said and supported every decision I made, except that she didn't. She just hid her disagreements until she could use them as leverage. That's not partnership. That's performance. What do you think partnership looks like? Two people who respect each other enough to disagree. Two people who make each other stronger instead of just smoother. Two people who... He stopped himself. I'm getting ahead of myself again. You are. I know. He picked up his coffee again, wrapping his hands around the mug in a way that reminded Rain of a cold night 25 years ago. But I can't help it. I've been waiting for this for so long that now it's finally happening. I keep trying to rush toward the ending. There's no guaranteed ending, Harrison. That's not how life works. I know, but I'm allowed to hope for one, aren't I? Rain looked at him, this powerful man sitting on her second-hand sofa, holding her $3 mug, hoping for something she wasn't sure she could give him. Yes, she said finally, you're allowed to hope. Chapter 9. 3 weeks after the confrontation at the penthouse, Rain drove to Atlanta. She didn't tell Naomi, she didn't tell Harrison. She simply packed a bag, got in her car at 4 a.m, and started driving south. Her mother's grave was in a small cemetery on the outskirts of the city. Nothing grand, nothing elaborate, just a simple headstone under an old magnolia tree. Dorothy May Caldwell, 1933 to 2017. She fed the world. Rain sat on the grass beside the headstone, the October wind rustling the magnolia leaves overhead. I don't know what to do, Mama. The words came easily, the way they always did when she was here. She had never stopped talking to her mother after Dorothy's death. The conversations had simply become one-sided. There's a man. You would like him. He's polite and broken and trying so hard to be better. He says he's been looking for me for 25 years. He says I saved his life with your pot roast. She laughed slightly. You'd probably tell me to stop being foolish and let myself be happy. The magnolia leaves rustled. But I'm scared, Mama. I'm 54 years old, and I've been alone for so long. I've built a life that works, maybe not the life I dreamed of, but a good life, a stable life. And now this man is offering to turn everything upside down, and I don't know if I'm brave enough to let him. She pressed her palm against the grass, feeling the earth beneath her. What would you do? If you were my age, and someone from your past came back offering everything you'd given up hoping for, would you trust it? Would you let yourself fall? Silence. Just the wind in the leaves. Rain closed her eyes. I'm tired of being careful, Mama. I'm tired of making the safe choice and watching life happen to other people while I stand on the sidelines. But I'm also terrified. What if I let myself love him and it all falls apart? What if I'm not the woman he's been imagining for 25 years? What if it works? Rain's eyes flew open. Harrison stood at the edge of the cemetery, still in his travel clothes, looking like he'd driven through the night. How did you find me? Naomi. He approached slowly, respectfully, stopping several feet away from her mother's grave. She called me this morning when she realized you'd left. She was worried. I was worried. I needed to think. I understand. He didn't move closer. I can leave if you want, but I was hoping you might let me meet your mother. Rain stared at him. She's dead, Harrison. I know. His voice was gentle. But you've been talking to her. I can tell from your face. And I thought, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to introduce myself. to tell her what her daughter meant to me, what you still mean to me. Rain felt tears rising. You drove all night to introduce yourself to a gravestone? I drove all night because the woman I love was in pain, and I wanted to be near her. He knelt on the grass beside the headstone, his expensive suit getting dirty without hesitation. Mrs. Caldwell, Dorothy, I'm Harrison Blackwell. I'm the man your daughter saved 25 years ago. Rain's breath caught. You raised an extraordinary woman. She fed me when I was starving, believed in me when I'd given up, and changed the entire trajectory of my life with a single act of kindness. I've spent a quarter-century trying to find her again, and now that I have... His voice cracked slightly. Now that I have, I'm terrified of losing her. He paused as though listening for a response. I know I can't make up for the years I missed. I know I can't erase the damage my wife has done to Rain's business or reputation, but I can promise you this. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of your daughter's faith in me. I will never stop fighting for her, and I will never, ever forget what she taught me about kindness. Harrison fell silent. Rain realized she was crying. She would have liked you, she whispered. She always said I needed someone who wasn't afraid to get his knees dirty. Harrison looked at his ruined slacks and laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. I'd get a lot more than my knees dirty for you. I know, Rain wiped her eyes. That's what scares me. Why does it scare you? She looked at her mother's headstone, at Harrison's earnest face, at the magnolia tree that had witnessed 25 years of her grief. Because I spent so long telling myself I didn't need this, that I was complete on my own, that wanting a partner was weakness and I was stronger without one. She met his eyes. But the truth is, I was just afraid of losing someone the way I lost Mama, afraid of investing in a future that might not exist. And now? Now I'm still afraid, but she reached out, took his hand. But I'm more afraid of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to try. Harrison's fingers intertwined with hers. Rain. Shh. She shifted closer to him, grass stains forgotten. Just let me have this moment, before everything gets complicated again. He cupped her face with his free hand, his touch gentle, questioning. May I? She nodded. The kiss was soft at first, tentative. Two people who had been waiting for decades, finally allowing themselves to believe it might be real. Then his hand slid into her hair, and her fingers curled into his collar, and the tentative became certain. 25 years of longing, 25 years of wondering, 25 years of almost giving up, all of it dissolved in the space between one breath and the next. When they finally pulled apart, Rain was laughing and crying simultaneously. I can't believe we just did that in front of my mother's grave. I think she approved. Harrison grinned, a boyish expression that made him look decades younger. The wind picked up at just the right moment. Rain looked at the magnolia leaves, still rustling in the breeze. Maybe she did. Harrison pulled her close, and they sat together on the grass beside Dorothy May Caldwell's headstone, watching the sun climb higher in the Georgia sky. What now? Rain asked eventually. Now we take it slow. Harrison kissed the top of her head. We figure out what we want this to look like. We let my divorce finalize, let the media circus die down, let your daughter stop glaring at me every time I enter a room. That last one might take a while. I've got time. He tightened his arms around her. I've got nothing but time, Rain. For the first time in 25 years, I'm not searching anymore. I found what I was looking for. And what was that? Home. He said the word simply, as though it explained everything. I was looking for home. Rain felt something shift in her chest, a door opening that she'd kept locked for decades. I've never felt like home to myself, she admitted quietly. Then let me help you find it. Harrison pulled back enough to look into her eyes. Not by rescuing you, not by fixing you, just by standing beside you while you figure it out. And if I never figure it out, then we'll be confused together. That's what partnership is, right? Two people, equally lost, navigating the same wilderness. Rain laughed despite herself. That's the least romantic description of love I've ever heard. I'm not trying to be romantic. I'm trying to be honest. He smiled. Romance is easy, honesty is harder. She studied his face, the lines of age, the silver in his hair, the steel blue eyes that still held the same intensity she remembered from a midnight kitchen in Memphis. Okay, she said finally. Okay? Okay, let's try. Let's take it slow. Let's figure out what this looks like. She squeezed his hand. But if you disappear on me again, never. The word was fierce, absolute. I will never disappear on you again. That's the one promise I can make with complete certainty. Rain believed him. She was terrified and uncertain and completely unprepared for whatever came next. But for the first time in 25 years, she wasn't facing it alone. Chapter 10. 6 months passed like water through fingers, swift and transformative. The divorce finalized quietly, without the dramatic courtroom battle Cordelia had threatened. In the end, she'd accepted a settlement that left her with enough wealth to maintain her lifestyle, several properties in locations far from Manhattan, and a confidentiality agreement that prevented either party from discussing the details. Harrison suspected Marcus had done something clever with the negotiations. He didn't ask what. The media moved on to fresher scandals, the headlines faded, the speculation dried up, and Rain's catering business flourished. The hotel contracts Harrison had arranged proved to be the foundation rather than the ceiling. Word spread about the woman who catered Blackwell hospitality events, about her extraordinary food, her professional demeanor, and the quiet dignity that made every client feel like the most important person in the room. Within months, she had more business than she could handle. Naomi quit her event coordination job to join her mother full-time. They hired 2 assistant chefs, rented a commercial kitchen space in Brooklyn, and started turning down clients for the first time in their history. "We need to expand," Naomi announced one evening, spreading spreadsheets across their small dining table. "The demand is there. We just need the infrastructure." Rain studied the numbers. That would require significant investment. "I have ideas about that." The voice came from the doorway, where Harrison stood with a bottle of wine and a tentative expression. Naomi glanced at her mother. "Did you give him a key?" "He knocked." "That's not an answer." "He brings good wine." Naomi's lips twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was progress. "What kind of ideas?" she asked Harrison. He set down the wine and pulled out a folder. "There's a building in Memphis, the original location where your grandmother's restaurant stood. It's been empty for years. The owners couldn't find a buyer willing to invest in the neighborhood." Rain's breath caught. "You found it?" "I bought it 6 months ago, actually, before I even knew I'd find you again. I've been maintaining it, keeping it structurally sound, waiting to see what the future would hold." He handed her the folder. "The deed is in your name, if you want it." Rain opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were photographs of a building she hadn't seen in over 2 decades. The facade was weathered but intact. The windows were boarded, but the frames were original. The sign, Caldwell's Soul Kitchen, had faded to ghostly shadows on the brick. "Harrison, it's not an investment. It's not a business opportunity. It's yours, free and clear, regardless of what happens between us." He sat down across from her. "I thought, maybe, you might want to rebuild it, or turn it into something new, or just know that it's there, waiting, whenever you're ready." Naomi had gone very still. "You bought my grandmother's building," she said slowly, "years ago, before you found us again. I bought it because it was important to the woman who saved my life. I didn't know if I'd ever find her, but I knew that if I did, I wanted to be able to offer her this." He met Naomi's eyes directly. "Your mother taught me that kindness doesn't need a receipt, but sometimes gratitude wants to express itself anyway." Naomi stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something she'd never done before. She smiled at him. A real smile, without wariness or suspicion. "You're a strange man, Harrison Blackwell. I've been called worse." "I imagine." She turned to her mother. "Well, what do you want to do with Grandma's building?" Rain was still looking at the photographs, at the faded sign, the familiar corners, the ghost of a life she'd thought was gone forever. "I want to bring it back," she said quietly. "Not as it was. Mama's gone, and you can't recreate the past, but as something new. something that honors what she built while creating something for the future. A restaurant. A restaurant. And maybe, she looked at Harrison, maybe a culinary school. For people who don't have traditional access to training. A place where someone who's hungry for something better can learn to feed themselves and others. Harrison's eyes were shining. That's exactly what I would have proposed, he said, but I wanted you to find your own vision first. You're insufferable. So I've been told. He reached across the table and took her hand. But I'm also incredibly proud of you. And I want to help, if you'll let me. Rain looked at their joined hands. She looked at her daughter, who was watching them with something that might finally be approval. She looked at the photographs of her mother's building, waiting in Memphis for her return. Okay, she said, let's build something together. Chapter 11. The grand opening of Dorothy's Table fell on a Tuesday evening in October, exactly 26 years after a hungry stranger had stumbled into a Memphis kitchen and been saved by pot roast and peach cobbler. Harrison had insisted on the date. Rain had rolled her eyes, but agreed. The building was transformed. The original brick facade had been lovingly restored, the vintage sign recreated from old photographs, the interior redesigned to honor the past while embracing the future. The dining room seated 40, intimate enough to feel like family, but spacious enough to accommodate the press and community members who had come to celebrate. The kitchen, though, was state-of-the-art. Industrial equipment, teaching stations, spaces designed for the culinary academy that would open in the spring semester. Rain stood at the pass, watching Naomi orchestrate the service with the precision she'd inherited from her grandmother and the innovation she'd developed on her own. You should be in the dining room, Naomi said without looking up. You're the guest of honor. I'm the chef. My place is in the kitchen. Mama. Naomi finally turned. You've spent your whole life hiding in kitchens while other people took credit. Tonight, you get to stand in the spotlight. Go. Rain hesitated. That's not really... It's exactly you. You just haven't had the chance to discover it yet. Naomi pushed her gently toward the door. Go celebrate what you built. We've got this. The dining room was full of people Rain had never imagined would be here. Memphis community leaders, culinary school students who had joined the inaugural class, local food critics who had driven from as far as Nashville to taste the resurrection of a legend, and Harrison standing near a small stage that had been set up in the corner. He caught her eye and smiled, that boyish grin that still made her heart skip, even after months of learning each other's rhythms. There she is, he said into the microphone, the woman of the hour. The room applauded. Rain felt her cheeks warm as she made her way to the front. I wasn't planning to give a speech. You're not, Harrison interrupted gently. I am, if you'll allow me. She raised an eyebrow, but gestured for him to continue. Harrison turned to face the crowd. 26 years ago, I walked into a kitchen in this neighborhood with nothing to my name except shame and hunger. I'd lost everything, my money, my prospects, my hope. I was 3 days from dying on the streets, and I had accepted that as my fate. The room was silent. A woman named Lorraine Caldwell changed that. She didn't know me. She had no reason to help me. But she fed me her mother's pot roast, gave me a place to sleep, and told me I was going to matter. Harrison's voice caught slightly. I've spent the last quarter century trying to live up to that faith. He turned to Rain. I built hotels because I wanted to create spaces where strangers could feel at home, the way your mother's kitchen made me feel. I crafted menus that tried to capture the warmth of a meal shared with someone who believed in you. I searched for you for years, hoping to repay a debt that could never truly be repaid. Rain felt tears threatening. But the truth is, this was never about debt. It was about love. Harrison's voice strengthened. Love for a woman who showed me that kindness is the most powerful force in the world. Love for a vision that refused to die even when circumstances said it should. Love for the possibility that two people who found each other once could find each other again. He extended his hand. Rain, you are not my redemption story. You are not my rescue fantasy. You are a brilliant, stubborn, extraordinary woman who happens to also be the love of my life. He smiled. I don't want to rescue you. I want to stand beside you while you rescue yourself, while you build everything you ever dreamed of, and probably some things you haven't thought of yet. Rain took his hand. Is this a proposal? She whispered. Only if you want it to be. Otherwise, it's just a declaration. He squeezed her fingers. Either way, it's the truth. The crowd faded. The restaurant faded. Everything faded except Harrison's eyes, still holding that same intensity she remembered from a midnight kitchen 26 years ago. Ask me, she said. What? Ask me properly. You've been waiting 25 years. Might as well do it right. Harrison's face broke into a grin. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Lorraine Caldwell, you saved my life with pot roast and changed my soul with kindness. I have loved you for 26 years, searched for you for most of that, and found you when I had nearly given up hope. Will you marry me? The room held its breath. Rain looked at the ring, an elegant sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, clearly chosen with care rather than flash. She looked at Harrison, this powerful man who had knelt in grass and dirt and service corridors to be near her. She looked at the faces surrounding them, Naomi crying openly near the kitchen doors, Marcus beaming from a corner table, community members and strangers all witnessing this moment that felt both impossibly private and perfectly public. Yes, she said. The room erupted. Harrison slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, and the kiss they shared was nothing like the tentative exploration in the cemetery. This was certain. This was claiming. This was two people who had spent decades wandering, finally arriving at the same destination. When they broke apart, Rain was laughing through her tears. You planned this. I hoped for this. Planning seemed presumptuous. You had a ring in your pocket. I've had a ring in my pocket for 3 months. I was waiting for the right moment. And you decided the right moment was in front of 50 strangers at my restaurant opening? I decided the right moment was whenever you were ready to hear it. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You told me you were ready, so I asked. Naomi appeared at their side, mascara streaked but smiling. If you break her heart, I will destroy you, she informed Harrison cheerfully. But congratulations, both of you. Thank you for the conditional blessing. It's the best you're getting. Naomi hugged her mother fiercely. Grandma would be so proud. I know. Rain hugged her back. I can feel her here. The evening unfolded like a dream after that. Courses emerged from the kitchen, updated versions of Dorothy's classics, each dish a tribute to the woman who had built something from nothing and passed that ability to her daughter. Toasts were made, stories were shared, the Memphis community welcomed back a daughter they hadn't known they'd lost. And through it all, Harrison stayed at Rain's side, not leading, not directing, just present. Supportive. Home. Chapter 12. The wedding was small. They held it in the garden behind Dorothy's table 6 months after the grand opening, on an unseasonably warm April afternoon. 50 guests, mostly family and close friends, a far cry from the 1,000-person galas that had defined Harrison's social life for decades. Marcus stood as best man, his speech brief and heartfelt. I've known Harry for 32 years. I've never seen him happy until now. Naomi served as maid of honor, her speech longer and more pointed. I spent months trying to protect my mother from this man. Turns out she didn't need protection. She needed partnership. Harrison Blackwell, you're still strange, and your wine choices are pretentious. But you make my mother smile in ways I haven't seen since I was a child. That's worth something. The vows were simple. Harrison went first. Rain, I spent 25 years building an empire, searching for you, and telling myself that success would eventually fill the emptiness inside me. It didn't. It couldn't. Because the emptiness wasn't about achievement, it was about belonging. You gave me a place to belong before I had anything to offer in return. You saw me when I was nothing and told me I would matter. I've spent my life trying to prove you right. Today, standing here, I finally feel like I have. Rain's voice was steady. Harrison, I spent 25 years convincing myself I didn't need this, that I was complete on my own, that wanting a partner was weakness and I was stronger without one. I was wrong. Not because I needed you to complete me. I was already complete. But because life is better shared, because joy multiplies when you have someone to celebrate with, because even the strongest woman deserves someone who sees her strength and loves her anyway. You see me, Harrison, the real me, stubborn and scared and still figuring things out at 55. And you love me anyway. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." The kiss that sealed their marriage was soft, unhurried, witnessed by people who loved them. The reception featured Dorothy's pot roast, updated for fine dining but still recognizable, still carrying the warmth that had saved a starving man's life 26 years before. And when the guests had gone and the garden was quiet, Harrison led Rain back into the restaurant. "I have something to show you." Behind the hostess stand, in a simple frame, hung the note he had left 26 years ago. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but the words were still legible. "To the woman who reminded me I was worth saving, I'll repay your kindness with a lifetime. H.B." "How did you—" Rain's voice broke. "You kept it." "Of course I kept it. I thought—" She touched the glass gently. "I thought you forgot, but I couldn't throw it away. It was proof that the night really happened, that I hadn't imagined you." "You didn't imagine me." Harrison wrapped his arms around her from behind. "And I didn't forget. I just took a very long detour getting back to you." Rain leaned into his embrace, looking at the framed note, this relic of a moment that had shaped both their lives. "Was it worth it?" she asked quietly. "The 25 years of searching, the failed marriage, all the time we lost?" Harrison was silent for a moment. "I don't know if anything is ever worth suffering," he finally said. "But I know this. I'm not the same man who walked into your mother's kitchen that night. I've grown, I've learned, I've become someone capable of appreciating what you offer, not just the kindness, but the challenge, the partnership, the stubborn refusal to let me rescue you. And that required 25 years of wandering? Maybe. Or maybe we could have found each other sooner and built something different." He turned her to face him. "But we're here now. That's what matters. We're here, and we're together. And we have whatever time is left to build something beautiful." Rain looked at her husband, this man who had started as a desperate stranger and become the love of her life. "What do we build next?" Harrison smiled. "Whatever you want. The culinary school opens next month. The restaurant is thriving. Your daughter is talking about opening a second location in Atlanta." He paused. "And I was thinking, maybe we could teach together, a class on hospitality, on kindness as a business philosophy, on what it means to feed people, really feed them, in ways that go beyond just filling their stomachs. You want to teach? I want to pass on what you taught me, the lesson I've been carrying for 26 years. He took her hands. "That success without soul is just survival. That kindness is the only currency that actually multiplies, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is feed a stranger and believe in their future." Rain felt tears rising again, but these were different. These were the tears of someone who had finally arrived where she was always meant to be. "Okay," she said, "let's teach." 1 year later, the Blackwell Caldwell Institute for Culinary Arts graduated its first class on a sunny June morning. 23 students, young people from underserved communities, career changers seeking new paths, immigrants dreaming of restaurant ownership, stood in the garden behind Dorothy's table and received their certificates. Rain gave the commencement address. "When I was your age, I thought I knew what my life would look like. I would marry my fiancé, run my mother's restaurant, have children, grow old in Memphis. None of that happened. My mother had a stroke. My engagement ended. I spent decades building something smaller than my dreams because I was too scared to reach for something bigger." She paused, looking at the young faces before her. "Then, 26 years after I thought my story was over, a man I'd helped once walked back into my life and reminded me that it's never too late to dream new dreams, that kindness plants seeds you might not see bloom for decades, that the meal you serve a stranger today might change the world 25 years from now." She smiled at Harrison, seated in the front row beside Naomi and Marcus. "You're about to go out into the world with skills and knowledge and connections. Use them well. But remember, the most important thing you'll ever do in a kitchen isn't technique or presentation or innovation. It's feeding people, really feeding them, nourishing their bodies and their spirits, and their belief in their own futures." She looked at Dorothy's portrait, hanging in a place of honor near the stage. My mother used to say that food is love made tangible. I didn't understand what she meant until I saw a starving man cry over pot roast, until I watched him rebuild his life on the foundation of a single meal shared with someone who believed in him. She turned back to the graduates. You have that power now, the power to transform lives with something as simple as a plate of food and a moment of genuine care. Don't waste it. Don't let fear or practicality or the demands of business make you forget why you started cooking in the first place. She raised her certificate, a symbolic gesture, since she'd never actually graduated from culinary school herself. Welcome to the family. Now, go feed the world. The reception afterward was chaotic and joyful. Students hugged their families, posed for photographs, sampled dishes from the restaurant's new summer menu. Rain found a quiet moment on the garden bench, the same bench where Harrison had proposed, where they'd exchanged vows, where they often sat in the evenings watching the Memphis sunset paint the sky. Harrison joined her. Good speech. I meant every word. I know, that's what made it good. He took her hand. Your mother would be proud. I hope so. Rain looked at the graduates mingling in the garden, at the restaurant her mother had dreamed of, and she had rebuilt, at the life she'd constructed from the ashes of lost hopes. I spent so many years feeling like I'd failed her, like closing the restaurant was a betrayal. And now? Now I understand that she never wanted me to preserve her legacy. She wanted me to build my own. Rain squeezed his hand. It just took me 55 years and one very persistent billionaire to figure that out. Harrison laughed. I prefer determined. You would. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the future unfold before them. Students who would open restaurants and change communities, a culinary school that would grow and evolve, a love story that had taken 26 years to find its ending. No regrets? Harrison asked eventually. Rain thought about it. She thought about her mother's stroke, about Theodore's ultimatum, about the decades of small dreams and quiet survival. She thought about the night a stranger had stumbled into her kitchen and changed everything without either of them knowing it. She thought about Cordelia's white penthouse and the check she'd refused. She thought about the cancellations and the headlines and the moment when she'd nearly given up. She thought about Harrison's hands, cold and trembling, wrapped around a coffee mug in a midnight kitchen. She thought about those same hands, warm and certain, sliding a ring onto her finger. No regrets, she said finally. Not one. Harrison kissed her temple. Good. Because I have plans for the next 26 years, and they're going to require your full participation. What kind of plans? The kind that involve teaching, traveling, expanding the institute, maybe opening a location in Atlanta like Naomi keeps suggesting. He paused. And possibly learning to make your mother's peach cobbler myself. That recipe is a family secret. I'm family now, Rain laughed, a full, joyful sound that she still wasn't entirely used to making. I suppose you are. She leaned into his shoulder, watching their students scatter into the Memphis evening to begin their own stories. Somewhere out there, a hungry stranger was walking toward a light in the darkness, hoping someone would show them kindness. Somewhere out there, a seed was being planted that wouldn't bloom for decades. Somewhere out there, a love story was beginning, messy and complicated and beautiful in ways that wouldn't become clear for years. That was how it worked. That was how it had always worked. You fed the stranger. You believed in their future. And then, if you were very lucky, you lived long enough to see that faith rewarded. Rain Caldwell, Rain Blackwell now, had been lucky. She intended to spend the rest of her life passing that luck along.